Hello everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday. I'm so sorry that this video has to unfortunately be uploaded late. We've been having some technical difficulties when it comes to uploading and also as far as the sound on the audio. So hopefully that all gets resolved and hopefully it can be all uploaded today. But in case you are unfamiliar, I am 1950s Minion Michelle, and today for this Animation Friday, I'm going to be addressing in particular evil powers that oftentimes I think are associated in particular with animation, uh, and this goes for both television as well as film. Um, what's interesting about a lot of the evil powers that a lot of these villains have is usually it's through some kind of power source like a staff. Um, a lot of it too can be through various potions that they make. Um, Also, their transformations that they're capable of doing are also rather frightening and sort of display their power that they have. Um, and I think it just seems fairly prevalent within a lot of these animated shows as well as within a lot of animated films. And you could probably even classify anime too as having these sorts of similar concepts inserted into their television and film as well. But largely speaking, at least a good majority of villains within animation do have some sort of evil power, some sort of source where they obtain their abilities to sort of fight as well as intimidate the protagonists. For example, Maleficent has her gigantic staff. She also has a bunch of, I guess you could say, I believe they're sort of some kind of goblins or something to help her out. She also has a very uh, powers. She has also this power to magically um, turn into some kind of orb and hypnotize people. So she's got a lot going for her as far as creativity is concerned, as far as to what she can do and how she can intimidate uh, and ultimately harm the protagonist. And I think that's largely why people are fascinated by a lot of animated films, in particular the animated villains. Now, the reason why you don't see a lot of these kinds of evil powers within live action films is largely, within live action you have obviously limitations. You can't just, make uh, whatever you want, really. I mean, there's obviously these restrictions, and you kind of have to either, CGI maybe certain things, or you have to, uh, you know, really get certain things to look a certain way without it looking fairly, I guess, goofy. Um, to really have the audience take it seriously. But within animation, it comes off just so much better, at least from my experience. It just really conveys to the audience a lot clearer the kinds of things that the antagonists are capable of. And I think that largely has to do with the fact that they're creating it largely from scratch. They're not having to rely on creating something that is somewhat resemblance to the real world. And I think that's why you see a huge amount of animated villains that do have these kinds of evil powers, and that's largely why they seem so intimidating. Uh, and I think magic oftentimes is utilized with a lot of these villains as well. And a lot of the fairy tales, in particular, the things that Disney bases a lot of its stories on, they do have these sorts of evil powers um, that are supposed to uh, harm the protagonists. And although there's obviously animated villains who don't necessarily have evil powers, there seems to be a recurring pattern of ones that do, or have some kind of ability to really try to push forward their whole master plan, so to speak. And I think that's largely a reason why they are just so fairly recognized. I mean, and it makes for a lot of great scenes within a lot of these animated films. Like if you look from Snow White to The Little Mermaid, you know, the villains, when they're sort of presenting their whole uh, abilities and their powers, you really do see how much of a threat and how intimidating they are. And it makes for great visuals. And animation is a fairly visual medium, so it only makes sense that they would really try to utilize that. And it just comes off as entertaining and it comes off as fun, and people like seeing these kinds of powers and seeing these kinds of capabilities that the villains are able to throw at the protagonists. And it's interesting to see how the protagonists sort of combat it. And that's really what largely has made animation so interesting and so fascinating over the years, is largely relying on having their villains have some kind of supernatural capabilities. Um, and that's why I think largely it's remained so prevalent. And it's really a concept that I think will continue to be utilized and used for a variety of different means. And it's really nice to see the variety that exists within animation as far as how these powers are used, because they're not really used in the same capacity as they are within other films. Um, and not all of them are designed to be maybe necessarily harmful, but maybe have harmful side effects, um, or are kind of just there to provide a means to an end. So it's really great to see this being a center point as far as when it comes to villains. And I think it'll continue to be part of a largely, uh, or at least it'll play, I think, a largely significant role as far as in which animators sort of utilize their bad guys' capabilities, because a lot of creativity and a lot of interesting things can come out of making someone having a certain kind of power that's not of this world, or just something that's just completely out of the box. And I think that's what really animation tries to push the envelope as far as what they can do. Um, and I think you can see this throughout all of the years. And when you look out throughout all of the various different animations, from Disney to DreamWorks to various television shows, you know, you really do see the powers really being a huge, huge part of the whole story. And I think overall they've been used fairly effectively. But I think that's really ultimately all I can say about them. However, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year. Hopefully I can stop by next year. But thank you and goodbye.